Should we do a bit of split screen action?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah.
Fancy doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the Investec Epsom Festival. Excellent 2 days. Hope you enjoyed all of our coverage and enjoyed the big races as well. I think we're going to go Derby and Oaks first of all. Derby on the top, Oaks on the bottom. Now, Derby was a faster run race, a faster win time than the Oaks. The Oaks was a little bit of a crawl, but what will this split screen tell us then, James?
Well, it'll tell us exactly that. We have to bear in mind the ground was slightly faster for the Derby.
Yeah.
There wasn't much in it, though, overall. We could also take a look at the trees. I don't know if they'll be illustrative of the fact that they were running into a wind on both occasions down the back straight and a tailwind in the home straight. And as you've already said, the pace, you should be able to pick out, there are 5 paths that split the Derby course, and I've used these, don't you, because you might see the first of them coming up at any minute now. It'll give you a first sort of, much better than using furlong poles, because there, see that path? You can already see the Derby field, we're about 5 or 6 lengths ahead. And we'll run this through until a very important point at the top of the straight. I've been writing pieces about sectionals. I got the one I'd written about Oath, which was 1999, 13 years ago, was the first time I wrote a piece in the, there was another path that passed by. I wrote a piece splitting the Derby into 5 sections, and I've got figures going back years and years. And of course,
they're miles ahead in the Derby there, crossing that bit, yeah.
We'll see the important point, and this will tell us about which is the best horse in the Investec Oaks. And a big clue is that it didn't win, of course. I won't be telling you anything you didn't know, but we'll be able to illustrate, hopefully visually, exactly how. Now we need to stop as they come into they're running down Tattenham Hill now, into the home straight. You can see that visually for yourself, they're miles ahead.
They are a long way ahead in the Derby, aren't they?
Path, careful. It's right at the top of the straight. And they've kicked off the front, haven't they, in the Derby as well, there. Now, the next thing that I'd like the director to do, not easy this, is to run on the Oaks field until the leaders get to the same point, and you'll be able to see the difference in the lovely job. What a lovely job. Look, there we go.
Wow, look at that.
Perfect. Now, they're not synchronized, but of course what this beautiful visual exercise will tell us now is
how they came home.
Absolutely. And I want you to look back at the bottom through the field to find the fugue. Can you see the fugue? Mm-hmm. Can you point to the viewers which the fugue is?
Wide, 2 from the back.
In pink. Now how far?
Yeah.
Beautifully, the ring of truth. How many lengths behind the leader is the fugue?
I'd say 5.
So he's giving the horses up, the leaders on the top, 5 lengths. Where's Camelot?
6 maybe.
Camelot is about a length in front of the fugue. Would you agree?
Yeah. Not much in it, to be honest.
Not much.
Pretty tight.
They're about the same. Right, we'll talk about the actual technicalities and the timings in a bit, but let's now let these 2 racers race each other and see what happens. So remember that the Derby, they've gone a stronger pace, so they've used up more energy, they're suffering, their muscles are becoming tireder as well, lactic acid is building up, they're going into oxygen debt sooner than in the Oaks, whereas in the Oaks they're running the race in a very messy, slow, fast, slow pattern. The fugue is trying to gain ground, but every length that the fugue at the bottom is trying to gain costs so much more energy to make up than for Camelot, who was closing into dead horses at the top, not literally, thankfully. And we'll see as they come up to the line. The director can catch these. Ian, beautiful. He'll get this spot on. Never lets me down. There we go. You can see the Oaks field. Probably, I think we're 3 or 4 lengths ahead. No way we could wind that back to this. It doesn't matter. Anyway,
all right.
So
what we've tried to illustrate is that we've levelled them up at the path in the home straight, and we've illustrated how quickly they've come home up the home straight. There you go. Oaksfield crossing the line.
Perfect. And there you can see. So in effect, over the last 3 or so furlongs, the Oaksfield were a little bit faster than a great horse, and considerably faster than the other horses in the Derby, who were beaten 5 lengths, and the same again. It was 5 and 6, I think, wasn't it? 5 head and 6. Now, we don't need to go right into this every time. I understand that, but as you know, and those of you watching at home, horses run their fastest speed figures when? In what circumstances?
Even pace, 12s basically.
Absolutely, yeah. When they run each section of the race evenly. So people say you can't use sectional times when the tracks are not like in America. It's a load of absolute baloney. And this, the way we've shown you this visually gives you a clue as to how it's done. All we do is we take races that produce good speed figures at Epsom over 1.5 miles in the entire history of the race course, going back as far as we want, back to 1960 or so, and we then measure how long each horse took to get the recorded an optimal time to each part of the course. But we don't express this in seconds, we express this in a percentage of their total time. That's all we do. So we end up then, say, on a perfectly flat track over 1.5 miles, a horse should run each furlong of the Derby in a 1/12 of its overall time. Now, measured from that path at the top of the home straight, horses should take 26% or 25 point something to 26% of their total time over the last 3 furlongs. And so if you time each horse's split for the last 3 furlongs from that path, you're able, with this perfect model of what even pace is, you're able to estimate how efficiently or inefficiently a horse ran its race. Like, for example, in the 2000 Guineas doing a similar thing, you found that Camelot, as we did when we did the piece on that, I mentioned Camelot ran really inefficiently. He was given a good ride to win the race by Joseph O'Brien, but not a good ride to actually optimise his time. He should have won by further. And obviously this race proved it. And again, it was the same again. He was too far back, ideally. His last 3 furlongs were quicker than that 26% by which represents even pace. And so again, despite the fact that he achieved a very big figure, however you want to measure it for more time, in a truer running counter, he could have won by further still. And so this sets the seal on his greatness in the Derby. Now, that's not telling anybody anything they didn't know. But what I wanted to ask you was, what did you think of his stablemate, Astrology? What do you think this tells us about Astrology's run?
I think he ran really well. I think he ran quite hard from a long way out.
Yeah. Now,
and he was taken on quite a long way out as well. So
yes.
He's weakened quite markedly in the last furlong or so. I think he's been forced to do too much too soon, really.
I would agree with you. But what we don't know at this stage is why. We don't know if he's a 1.5 mile horse who was forced to use his energy inefficiently. That
would be my reading of it.
Or whether he's a 1.25 mile horse who was well ridden to get the trip by Ryan Moore, but simply did not last home. Now, of course, we can look at the way he moves, and what a beautiful mover he is. A really straight, athletic. This is the horse in the lead.
He looked like he could nick it here, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And I think the comments that people have made about the betting in running, the fact that Camelot touched 9-2, I think people are getting the wrong end of the stick about that. They're saying, oh, it just shows what ridiculous prices you get on the exchanges. But that's not the normal message of exchange markets. Indeed, what those odds told you was that far from being given the brilliant ride that some have said about Camelot, he actually wasn't that well ridden in the grand scheme of things, not from a strictly energetic point of view. He was too far back, and that's why he had to cover the last 3 furlongs. Now, it didn't matter. He won by 5 lengths, so it would be ludicrous to criticise Joseph O'Brien.
And that shows just how good he is.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A jockey's task is to win the race. He won the race by 5 lengths. You know, he more than accomplished the job he was set out to do. But it's very fanciful to describe that as a good ride, because to say it's a good ride implies that there isn't a jockey in the weighing room that couldn't have won on Camelot. I mean, what would they have done? Dismounted, fallen off, turned right at Tattenham Corner?
Yeah.
The point is that is a brilliant horse who had the luxury of running the race less efficiently than he might and still won easily. But now, what about the Oaks? We have a different race here. We have a race in which the field have gone steadily to the path, and the last 3 furlongs is one of the fastest split times in the history of Epsom Racecourse. Run by...
Over 1.5 miles.
Run by the Fugue.
Yeah. Right.
From off the
pace. So she's come home stronger than anything did in the Derby, or of course in the Oaks, from the path.
Or in the Oaks, yeah.
Right.
And what that tells you as well is that her energy was used by William Buick less efficiently than any horse who ran in either the Derby or the Oaks. And that she was narrowly beaten means it's a fairly safe conclusion I say fairly safe because you never know these things for sure.
Yeah, this is where she gets hampered.
It's a fairly
taken back.
That wasn't the problem, though, was it? That's not what defeated her, because they were crawling at this point, and there was still ample opportunity for him to take closer order, Mirko de Muro style. Now, that might have involved ground loss. There might have been 100 other reasons,
but they were crawling.
And if you look, he several times looked to rein her back and take her back towards the back of the field. Now, I don't know why that was. I'm not here to sort of comment on the technicalities of riding a horse. I've got no clue. All I'm here to do is to state the objective facts of athletics performance, which is if she'd been ridden even a length or two closer to the pace, she'd have won the Oaks. And that's the jockey's responsibility. How it came about is up to you as a viewer. There is no absolute truth in horse racing. You can never say, you know, that was a definitively awful ride. You can't say that. You don't know what he was feeling. You don't know what his instructions were. You don't know a million and one things. And there's plenty of evidence to say that he's a very level-headed rider. He's already come out and said that, you know, it wasn't his finest moment. So fair enough. Let's just move on to the next race. There's no point sort of going on about
dwell on it.
Exactly, or inferring things about his
So
riding.
where's the path? Where's the path now? We're nearly there, aren't we? They've just swung around Tottenham Corner.
It's just one moment in one race in one season.
Here we go.
There.
From here.
So from there on, that it was one of the fastest ever split times for a horse in a 1.5 mile race at Epsom tells you that the horse ran unusually well to reach his final position, but it doesn't actually tell you whether the fugue might not be slightly quirky, it might not stay at 1.5 miles thoroughly. There are things that are imponderables that we need to know, so you can never really definitively, that's the message, you can never really definitively say what should have happened or what would have happened. You can only work within the limitations of the data.
As far as Was is concerned, was her energy doled out quite evenly through the race?
Yeah, but again, there are many, many cases of this in racing history where a horse has received the best ride to win and it's gone on to actually confirm the form. And that's because of something that Aidan O'Brien is acutely aware of himself. Heart in racing character. Now, Aidan O'Brien, I've only been to see him once, but I was mesmerised. I've told this story loads of times. I know you must be bored by hearing it.
No, carry on.
In the hope that there is someone at home who hasn't. He's mesmerised by this concept of how much of a horse's expressed ability is down to heart, down to will. And as horses progress from being in maidens to their conditions races to group races, they start off from a very similar talent base. And as they go on, it's the actual experience or the way that they react psychologically and physically to the seasoning and conditioning of going up those steps that determines whether they become see the stars or whether they become a disappointing individual who doesn't want it. And the reason for that is that you can't put a percentage on this, but a significant percentage of expressed ability is the horse's desire to do it. And so Aidan O'Brien is not obsessed, but he's very interested by this idea of the dark side. That if you campaign a horse, you ask it too much too soon, then it frightens itself.
You turn it off, basically, to racing, don't you?
And so the champion athlete, the champion racehorse athlete, is a horse who has the confidence to express its physical gifts to the point very close to that which will kill it. Because don't put any sort of spin on this. Horses, when they're running full out at that type of top-class pace, they're one stride away from dying. The tensile forces on their cannon bones, for example, are about 99% of that required to absolutely shatter them. And horses, although we don't know this sort of thing, when it's been measured on a treadmill and things like that, horses have a really strong relationship with the racing experience, which is why some go on to be like Desert Orchid and Floyd and other horses trained by David Ellsworth and other trainers too. Now, other horses can take on this sort of like real champion and Giant's Causeway type appearance. We can see it, we can sense it. And that's part of the reason, I think, why we actually love horse racing, because they're not just robots or cars who are mechanically responding to the experience. They're actually involved in it as well themselves. And this idea that champion horses will go voluntarily to that point which is very close to their absolute point of destruction.
Wall, basically, yeah.
is what makes them so brilliant. And when you think about that, there's the horse's will to do it, but there's also the horse's soundness, and why that's such a massively important characteristic in horses, and why it's important in breeding horses, is that one can't go without the other. You know, if a horse senses that its lungs are bleeding, or
something's hurting.
You've always made this point. Horses who pull, it's such a disastrous sign, isn't it? Because outwardly to us, it gives us the idea that they're running to the pain barrier, that they want to get it over with, that they're not relaxed about the whole thing. They don't want to be enthralled to their athletic talent.
That's why I always say it's wrong to say, oh, he's pulling hard, or he just must be a bit of a nutter. There's a lot more to it than that.
Not at all, no. And obviously, if you think about how a horse would react to knowing, for example, its leg hurts in a race, or it's struggling for air, it's going to have, right from being on a race course, it's going to have a real stressed relationship with that whole experience. And so when we look at sectional times and we project horses to do things that they have not, we've got to bear in mind that 1 ounce of realisation is worth a ton of promise. And so we shouldn't just write off the winner of the Oaks and say, well, she was up with a steady pace. Because she showed
beat the Fugue again, couldn't she?
She showed guts and tenacity.
Yeah.
She's prepared to put her head down and run. And that was in a steadily run race. Off stronger fractions, a race becomes more of a test, more of a war, more of a test of the type of qualities that she's already showed she possesses.
So that's the answer that the Fugue's got to give us then?
Yes.
Can she do it in a race that's more of a war?
Absolutely. How will she react to that experience? And that's exactly right. How does her system, her stamina, her soundness, her mind react? If she'd had to run the race the winner did, might she have curled up? Might she have pulled too hard in front?
But the raw ability's there.
But that's right. What the sectionals tell you is that hypothetically, in normal circumstances, they normalise the running of a race and suggest that a horse has very, very special qualities if the other parts of her or his game turn out to be there. Okay. And that's what the race course is there for. And that's why top-class flat horses need to do it over and over again, and if ideally over a couple of seasons. Yeah, and ideally that's what we'll see Camelot doing, as See the Stars did as well, of course. Interesting stuff, James. If you've got any comments on that at all, StudioRacingUK.com. We will be looking at the Coronation Cup in the context of the Derby as well, straight after our next.